This is part 2 on how I knit panels on my circular knitting machine, and our test project that we're making here is a tea towel, which I feel is just a nice, really easy, beginner-friendly project to learn how the machine works when making the panels. So if you need to go back and look at part 1, I will have that video linked in the video description below for everybody. So to start with, we're going to continue with the counting of the rows. So at the end of part 1, I counted 10 rows and I marked it with that green stitch marker. So now when I go to count more rows, I know where that green stitch marker at, that's my 10th row. I'm just going to count 10 more up, and I count these little loops here. So I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Mark it with your loom pick, and just for this one right now, I'm going to move this green stitch marker up, and that's my 20th row. And then when I get to my 40th row, I'll mark it again with another stitch marker, so then I can count 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. Next, we do still have more rows on here, so we just need to continue to count up till you get under that peg and there's no more rows. And I'm at 30, and that's how I double check that I have 30 rows on my digital counter. And that's the easiest way I found, just to continue to check myself to make sure I'm not doing too many or not enough rows. And this definitely comes in handy when you want to make panels for clothing. And then a tip I got in one of the comments on my other videos from Armadillo Alert was to try binder clips to help with tuck stitches so it doesn't get stuck on that 3rd and that 46 needle. So I have these larger ones that I'm going to try out, and this did seem to help. It would still get stuck every now and then. I'm pretty sure because I'm using 100% cotton yarn. Acrylic is silkier and slips around easier, but this seemed to work really good and I didn't have as much issues. So this really helped. It got stuck on the screw, so folding in the tabs worked better. This was great. Thank you so much for the awesome tip. So now, once we get done with our 100 rows, we are going to cast off, and we want to use our waste yarn. So we want to put our project yarn in the middle of the machine, and I keep it on the skein because we're going to use that to make our edging later. And so might as well just keep it on there, and then we don't have to try to tie it on. Now we're going to add on our waste yarn, and we want to take our waste yarn, put it all the way down in the yarn holder and in the tensioner, and then we're going to put it onto the 3rd needle right where our project yarn has come off. And so we want it to go under that needle and hook on, and then we'll go back and forth again. And again, I will do quite a few of these rows of the waste yarn just to make sure everything stays tight and secure. And then you also get that curl from the beginning and ending of your project. So this helps where the waste yarn curls, and it's really easy to identify our project yarn, and the project yarn has a tighter stitch as well. And again, you just want to be careful when you are adding onto that yarn, when you're going back and forth. Take your time to make sure nothing slips or tucks. Once I got a couple rows, I knot the 2 tail ends together, and then I finish up my rows. Once you get as many as you want, I think I did about 10, then we can put the yarn in the middle out of the yarn holder, and then we crank it one time around with no yarn, and then when we crank it back, it will fall off the machine. And since those are live stitches at the end of that waste yarn, we didn't cast it off. They can unravel, so that's why you want to do about 10 or so rows. So here's what the project looks like once it's off the machine. We have our waste yarn here, and then 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 rows. So you can see how I mark those with the stitch markers, and it makes it really easy to count. And then we have our waste yarn that finishes, and I still have the project yarn attached. You'll see that there is a little bit of curl on the sides, so once we do the finished edge, that's going to help with the curling as well as blocking the project. That will help with the curling, and then that's why it's nice when we have the waste yarn, because the top and bottom have the curl in the waste yarn part of it, and we can identify our stitches really easily. So to do our edging, we're going to crochet them. So we're going to take our project yarn that's still attached, and I have a 3.5 millimeter crochet hook that I'm going to use, and we are going to do single crochets, and we're going to crochet inside each one of these stitches. So you can see there's this line here. That's where I'm going to insert my crochet hook. So over this edged curl part, that's the part that was on the 3rd and 46th needle. That's what we're going to crochet around. I feel like that's what gives it the nicest look, but you can insert your crochet hook wherever you like. So to start our first single crochet, we want to yarn over, go through the project, yarn over, pull through. Now we have 2 loops on our hook. Now we yarn over again, pull through those 2 loops. That's our first single crochet. Now we can do the rest like normal. We have 1 loop on the hook, go through the project, yarn over, pull through. There's 2 loops on the hook, yarn over again and pull through the 2 loops. And that's our next single crochet. And we're going to continue this all the way down each one of those holes down along the side of our project. And you kind of just have to untwist it a little bit so you can get in there and see it. But you just do every single opening down, and it should be 100 of them if you're counting. And so I will speed this up and I'll meet you down at the end. Now that we're at the end of the project where our waist yarn is, we're going to do our last few single crochets. And then we want to chain 1, and now we're going to start working on the stitches that are in our waist yarn. So this is why you want a contrasting color waist yarn, because you'll see that the white stitches that are in between those teal stitches, that's our first set of live stitches of our project. The other stitches that are the dark teal, that's our waist yarn. So you just want to pick up each one of those white stitches and do a single crochet all the way across. And then once you get done with all of these, you just want to go back and make sure you didn't miss any of those stitches, because once we remove the waist yarn, if we skipped any, it would unravel. So just make sure there's no holes in your project. If it is, just pull out the crochets that you did, and you'll just want to pick those up before we move on. Now that we're at the end of where the waist yarn stitches are, we're going to do the same thing like we did on the long side. So we finish up our single crochets, and then we're going to chain 1, and now we're going to start working again down along the long side of this, in between each of the stitches that the beginning and end needle made. And so there should be 100 of these. That will do 100 crochets, single crochets down. Now we're to our other part of our waist yarn. So once we get our 100th one done, we're going to do 1 chain. And now again, we're going to pick up each of those live stitches that are sandwiched in between our waist yarn. And that is the first row of white that's between the light teal this time. And again, just make sure you don't miss any of these. And then we'll meet back at the beginning. Now that we're back at the beginning of our project where we started, we just want to slip stitch to join, and then we can cut that. And now we want to remove our waist yarn. And so what I like to do, if you did the ravel cord method, you can just remove your ravel cord and it will come out. If you didn't, you can just take the tail end that's nearest your project stitches, and you can just kind of unwrap it, unknit it back and forth. And this is a little bit easier than going through all 10 rows. You can just pull it out this way. And you want to do this on both your cast on and cast off waist yarn. Remove it all by just unknitting the tail end that's closest to your projects, or use the ravel cord method, whichever you prefer. Once both sides of the waist yarn are removed, what's left is the tail ends of your project yarns. You just want to weave in those ends to the single crochets of your projects. And I just kind of do a knot, and then I weave them in back and forth, and then cut off any excess. Next, you'd want to block your project. And then here are some pictures of the finished project. And you have your tea towels. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and follow for more tutorials.